think it's so funny because I feel like this is the first time I'm actually like seeing you without your mask, and it's like
Mm.
kind of funny because it's like I'm so used to just seeing like your eyes and your hat. It's hilarious.
Yeah, like the Al Borland thing, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's interesting. It's like it's I remember your face from just like the interviews, but like it was just so interesting like when you meet people and then you don't even see their face for the longest, but like you like vibe with them. Like I have always enjoyed working with you. It has been such a pleasure, like even just getting to know you. And I love our conversations at work so much. I just had to bring you on the pod. I was like, everybody needs to meet Ted. I'm like, oh, you're so awesome. But I'm curious then, like, what got you interested in engineering? Like, what made you go into technology?
I kind of started down the road of wanting to get into game development, and so I decided to go back to school to try and pursue a career in game development, and just in looking at what were the typical paths from where I was to a career as a game designer, for example. It seemed like there was two typical paths. There was like you were either part of the art team doing digital media, or you were part of the engineering team programming. And typically, it would be an individual that had worked up to being like a lead of one of those teams, so like a lead programmer in a studio, would then transition to being like a game designer, which is what long term I was thinking that I wanted to do, because it's kind of the person with the big picture vision that coordinates between the two teams to kind of bring the big picture uh, vision to life. And I felt like between just interpersonal skills and the way that my brain works, like I very much am big picture oriented, more so than like I suppose detail oriented. Um, and so it just seemed like a good career. Like it seemed like it would fit my personality. And so I was looking at the paths to get there. And it just seemed like if I went and got a computer science degree, that was going to leave a lot more avenues open to me if say it was too difficult to get into the game development. I could go use that degree as an engineer, as a software engineer, a lot of different ways. And it seemed like it left me a lot more options than if I went to the art institute and went the digital media side. It just seemed like that was a very narrow path. And so yeah, so I went back to school for computer science, and I think I found in the process that I really just enjoy problem solving.
I feel like that's really what it comes back to, right? It's like I think that's what engineers love in general is like the fact that you actually get to solve a problem and actually figure out like how do you break it down into something that's actually feasible from like something that's really huge. I guess do you have like your favorite video games that you like to play seeing that you had like a passion for video games, or are you like unbiased and you're like I love them all?
No, I am kind of particular. That there's certain genres that I don't really touch, and there are certain genres I like. And since a kid, since a little one, I've really enjoyed sports games. I played Madden for so many years. That series has gone on for forever. And I've always liked racing games, sports games, and kind of more in my adult life, I guess I've gotten into shooters.
Sweet. Do you play Rocket League?
I love it because I feel like it's like that's the one I'm like totally addicted to at the moment. But I feel like it's a cross between my two favorites, like sports and racing games. Like you have the car, you have all like the car mechanics in a sports game, so it's like a cross between my two faves.
Rocket League just seems so hard. Like, I remember one time I was like, when I was an intern, I got to see like the accessibility gaming room that they make for to allow and see like how can they make like gaming more accessible to people with different, abilities. And it
Mm.
is crazy like to see like how they're able to make this game that even like if you have no mobility in your hands, you can still play and like beat someone that's like completely able. Like, it is so insane. I feel like people that are good at Rocket League, I don't even know how you guys get it in the goal. It just, like, seems so difficult.
Yeah,
Ugh.
it's definitely one that keeps you coming back. I think all the best games are seem really really hard at first. Yeah.
I know, like, I it's interesting, like, I feel like I get more entertainment, like, watching people play Fortnite, like, I enjoy it more than, like, watching shows on Netflix, it's wild, like, it's so interesting, and it's so funny, like, the commentaries, I be bugging out, it's ridiculous. But I'm curious, like, where did you study CS, and what was, like, the programming language that you were first introduced to? Did you also have to write "Hello World" and do all that all that jazz?
Yeah, so I actually started. It made a lot of sense for me financially to try and knock out some of the prereqs at a community college, and
Smart,
actually,
so smart. That's really the way to go. That's really the secret.
yeah, yeah. So at the time, I was actually living in El Paso, Texas, and so
Cool.
um, I started at El Paso Community College and took like my first three semesters there. They did semesters, which honestly, after transferring up here and doing quarters, I actually preferred the semesters. It felt like we had more time. So I did my first three semesters there, about a year and a half, and like the introductory programming courses, like programming 101, 102, 103, that kind of stuff, and it was all in Java, and it
Mm,
was data structures, control structures. Yeah, I was surprised at how much I enjoyed it. It was one of those where I was reading chapters ahead in the textbook, and writing programs like in my spare time that weren't.
incredible. I hated my EECS courses. So, like, CS was so hard. Like, I swear I would be just up at night, just miserable that I couldn't get this euchre game coded. I mean, I'm telling you, all Michigan students know the trauma of euchre.
From El Paso Community College, I was going to move back to Washington just because of the industry here, and I was raised here in Washington, and so all my family and friends were here, and it just made so much sense with the University of Washington, with all the industry here, to move back to Washington, finish up my undergrad here, and then have much more opportunity for placement after. So after those first three semesters, I actually transferred to Bellevue College and finished an associate's there, which guaranteed admission to UW, not to the program, but to the school. And so then I transferred to UW Bothell from Bellevue College, and then finished up.
Sweet. I guess, like, how was it growing up in Washington? Like, I guess, like, how was it, I guess, even seeing, like, the industry develop, like, in the state? Because I feel like I could imagine, like, how Washington was maybe before all the big tech companies came in and, like, established their footprint and all these transplants showed up. Like, I'm curious, like, how was it?
Well, that's funny. So I don't think that I was really aware of that, aware of what industry we had here when I was younger, right? Um,
Interesting.
and that was more like adult life decisions, I think, especially because I went back to school a little bit later. I had a bit of a gap. It was good in that I knew exactly what I wanted to do and was focused. But as far as like back to your question, where I can answer that is like just in my hobbies and like what I've seen happen to the things that I like to do. So like I grew up about a half an hour, just over a half an hour away from Stevens Pass, and I spend all of my winters, the entire winter skiing, snowboarding, and that was truly my first love of snowboarding, and I've seen that go from a mom and pop ski resort to it's changed hands several times to large corporations. First Harbor Resorts, and then now it's Vail. And every time they do exactly what Vail's doing right now, where they just dump $17 million into lift updates and stuff, and they put this money into trying to update the resort. They want it to be a destination resort, but they don't. No one solved infrastructure for that particular resort, so it doesn't have the hotels and parking that a destination resort should have, and so
This is true.
they just don't have the infrastructure. I mean, I've gone. It's taken the fun out of it. Got there at whatever, you get a slow start, you get there an hour late, and I've not been able to find a parking spot. I've turned around and driven home. So I
Really?
guess
That is wild. That's wild.
I've seen the number of people recreating in the outdoors in the area that I grew up in just explode. Hiking trails and ski resorts and things, and that's great. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think that's great that people are getting out there and, enjoying the natural world. But, Washington definitely is a state that doesn't have a lot of acres of public land per capita. So yeah, there's been some crowding with the industry that we have here for sure.
I feel that's so interesting. I will agree, like the drive to Stevens, like at first, because I drive out of Kirkland, and at first it's like, cool. And then like the next 30 minutes before you reach your destination, it like the landscape completely changes. You go from no snow to like like you're in the middle of a blizzard.
Yeah.
You see these tiny cars with no snow change trying to get up there, and you're just like, "Where are you going with this little car, bro?" Like, and then obviously they get stuck, and then you see like all of these like snow plows and like police trying to help people. I remember one time we went and literally when we left, like the entire lane to go towards the resort was blocked just because they had so many car crashes of people just
Mm,
trying to get there and they couldn't. It was
yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah,
Ridiculous.
it's funny you say that about it just like totally changing. I think that's what I first like kind of fell in love with as like a kid. When I was like 5, my dad would take me skiing, and I'd fall asleep in the truck and wake up and open my eyes, and it's like a completely different world, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. You would be like, "No way. There's this much snow here." You're like, "There's no way." You're like, "I just saw the ocean like an hour ago. This isn't right." But it's that elevation gain. It is so insane. And for me, like I will say, when I grew up on the island, I used to think like, "Oh, we have mountains, with our little hills." And then I came out here and I was like, oh, that's what they mean when they say mountain. I see now. Different, different.
Yeah.
I guess, like,
No.
what is your favorite part about the outdoors here in Washington? Because I agree, like, that's definitely my favorite part of the state is, like, how beautiful all the trails are and, like, all of the different things that you can see. I'm curious, like, what is your experience? Like, what do you have your favorite trails? Like, I love Lake 22, but I'm a little biased there.
You know, uh, that's kind of a tough one for me because I grew up here. So like I love the climate, and I don't know that someone who comes from somewhere else, someone born in Montana might not feel the same way, but I love the climate. So like it is beautiful, and there is so much to do and so much to see, but beyond that you can do it, right? Like in Texas, I lived in Texas for a few years, and it was so hot that like, and maybe that's where the video game stuff came from, where I like really started to dive into video games. It's like that's all I could do was sit in the AC and like play some video games. And I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you're not doing a whole lot. If it's 113 degrees, you're probably not making it too far on a hike, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I see what you mean.
So the climate's agreeable, and it is it's just it's beautiful, and there's a lot of opportunity. There's fishing, hiking, hunting, skiing. you know it's all here, and you can do it.
I definitely like I remember when you told me you were a hunter, I'm like, "Ooh, the vegans, they not gonna like the rest of this conversation." Vegans beware. But yeah, I remember when you were talking about like your experiences hunting and I was just so like in awe because low key there's like a part of me that's like if I have to prepare for the apocalypse, can I find food. And I know I'm like, "No, girl, you cannot. You have never even killed a fish. Like, how are you gonna go out and find you food?" And I like have such mad respect for hunters, but I feel like it's an opinion that I've had that's changed because at least like growing up on the island, we don't really hunt. Like
Mm,
the island's only so big. I don't know what you would be hunting really. I mean, I think people like we fish. Some people
hmm
like go and they like will, like get conch shells or wilks or
hmm
maybe. Maybe some people eat iguanas. I don't even think that that's super popular, but it's like we don't really do too much hunting. So like when you grow up, all you hear about are like these Americans that they go and they hunt, innocent rhinos in the savannah, and everyone's just like, "Oh my god, these people are so terrible, like screw hunters." But at the same time, it's like I realized like hunters actually have their role in like the food chain, and like people don't realize that. And a lot of it is like just ecosystem control, and like the reason that I feel like there are hunting seasons is primarily to help like control population of different species. But I'm curious, like, how did you get into hunting? And I guess like what is your worldview as a hunter, given like I feel like all the flack that hunters get, which I think is a bit of misunderstanding and miscommunication.
Yeah, yeah. So it's funny. I was thinking about that a little bit in anticipation of this, this conversation. I was kind of thinking about that, and it seems like when I sit and look back, like reflect now, it seems like it was the next logical step in my progression as like an outdoorsman. I grew up, at a young age. I drowned power bait and worms in the lake for fish, and that didn't really hold my interest. I didn't have the patience for fishing as far as like just drowning bait in a lake for rainbow trout. But when I got older, someone introduced me to bass fishing, and then I was fishing with artificial lure, and it introduced this whole new challenge of like how to present an artificial lure in a way.
Mm.
And between the skill set of like presenting that artificial lure and the physical activity of just cast and retrieve, that was enough that I had the patience for that. I like really enjoyed it. And from there to fly fishing, and from fly fishing to now bow hunting. And so it kind of just seems like the next logical step. But the way that it actually happened is kind of funny because what is my wife now, at the time, was my girlfriend, and we were watching Game of Thrones, and she made some offhand remark about, being an Arya Stark or something. She made some comment that prompted me to ask her, like, well, should we get bows and take up archery and bow hunting, and like kind of kidding. And then she was like, yeah, let's do it. And so like a month later, I bought her an $800 Bowtech bow for her birthday, and
Wow.
like we were off and running. Because as soon as I shot her bow, I was like, oh my gosh, I've got to get a bow myself. And so I got a bow. I actually just got a hand-me-down bow. My dad had bought one years ago that he passed to my brother. No one had really used it, but this bow had been kicking around for 10 years or something. And so anyways, once I got my hands on a bow, I took to it the way that I do anything. I like really, I want to be the best at it, and I want it to happen overnight. And so like I really dove in. Like it's been consuming. So like I say, I love snowboarding, I love fishing, but since taking up bow hunting and archery 3 years ago, it's pretty much consumed any spare time that I have. So
Wicked. Can you shoot like a bullseye? Like just you're like aim, shoot, fire, and you get bullseye every time? Like how cold are you at this?
it depends on how far away I am,
Okay,
really.
okay.
Out to about 50 yards or 150 feet or so. Yes.
Skills,
Yeah.
skills.
Within an inch or so of where I'm aiming. Yeah.
That's dope.
Out to about 50 yards. But beyond that, I don't. It starts to degrade beyond that. What's interesting is like there was this comment about Arya Stark, and then me kind of joking with the wife, and then it all just kind of snowballed. But the truth is, I was already toying with this idea of wanting to provide local, sustainably sourced, organic, non-GMO protein for my family, and
Love it.
at the
Love
same
it.
time try to be self-sufficient, and like you're talking about prepping for the apocalypse, like being self-sufficient and building the skill set, and at the same time divorcing from factory farming and inherent methane production. Like there's so much that a person can grab a hold of. I was already kind of toying with this idea of like really wanting to do that. So all it took was her being in like even remotely interested, and I dove on it. And even now it's hard for me to like say one thing like this is why I'm into this, because like I say there's so much to grab a hold of. And you even touched on it, participating in the North American model of conservation. And the truth is, like, suburban sprawl is a thing, and it's only going one direction. Like, we're not making more land, but we are making more people. And there has to be there has to be a balance. Like, it's nice to be able to have these wilderness areas and these places that we want to say this little section will stay unimpeded by man, but they're going to be little sections, right? Because we're only growing outward, and there is a need for management. And I do believe in science-based management, and I do believe in managing our wildlife as a public renewable resource that can be harvested, as long as the science backs that up. That it's a resource that can be used and should be used for your family. And
No, I love that. I love that so much. I think like it's so beautiful the way that you framed it because I really feel like hunters, and I'm sure like there's different calibers of hunters, and I'm curious like what is like the stigma when you're in like hunting communities. But I think it's so beautiful the way that you framed it because it is really truly about providing your family a source of protein that is healthy and is not a part of this like mass production of meat that to me is so inhumane. Like it's just so terrible like how we butcher animals and don't even care at all about like their experience of life and being and how that affects the meat that we are then consuming, given the fact that it has all these hormones and these animals are under so much stress all the time. Like, what do you think that that's gonna do to us when we eat that meat versus an animal that's out in the wild, it's living its life, it's, agile because it's out, fighting off natural predators, and then you come and you just kill it, the one animal, you butcher it completely all the way down, you make sure that you're taking, all of the meat, and even if you don't consume it for yourself, like you give it to people or you leave the rest for like the other animals in the food chain that can feed off of that source. But I feel like people don't always get that. Like they think that people are just out there killing animals because they get the pleasure out of like killing the animal. And it's like, no, like that you're a psycho if you get pleasure out of it.
yeah,
Like it's a little different.
yeah, that's something that no one tells you when you sign up for this journey, is that in order to be successful, as far as like harvest something as a bow hunter, you have to understand the animal that you're pursuing. I mean, especially bow hunting, because you need to be, like I said, 50 yards. You know what I mean? I've taken one deer in that 3 years, just this past year, and that was at like less than 10 yards. It was like 7 yards. So it's a very intimate experience, and you need to understand the animal to just be able to put yourself in that position. And the more you understand the animal, the more you admire them. And I think that there's this idea in people's minds of what a fisherman is, and what a hunter is. And I think that for a fisherman, it's that guy in the boat that hooks a worm on the hook, throws it in the lake, cracks a beer, and waits for a fish to bite it. And that I wasn't in love with that idea. I didn't have the patience for that kind of fishing. And I think that for hunting, I think it's Elmer Fudd. I think it's the redneck blasting his shotgun around the neighborhood, chasing deer.
Yeah.
Um, and and it's just, I think that especially people that do live in a large city and maybe don't engage in the outdoors, they just don't know. You just don't know what you don't know. But they're in order to pursue game in this way, you do have to understand the game, and you do admire and respect the animal. And with that admiration comes at harvest time. It's not a fun thing. Like you said, no one that is doing this like enjoys the the actual harvesting of an animal. I enjoy the pursuit. I'm not gonna lie about that. Like it is challenging. It is
I feel like it's kind of like man versus wild. It's like in our DNA to have like that. I feel like adrenaline of hunting an
mm,
animal because it's
yeah,
a part of like our evolution. This is how humans survive before we all
right,
got lazy. Like,
right. Yeah, no, there's definitely enjoyment and adrenaline in that pursuit and in just trying to overcome the challenge in front of you, right? Like I think achievement is like one of the major motivators for people for different, one of the things that might motivate a person to do certain things. And if you're able to take a deer with a bow, it is an achievement. It is I've learned that bow hunting is like one of the most challenging undertakings that I've participated in. I was surprised at just how difficult it is.
I can only imagine, cause like, with a gun, it's easy, you just pull the trigger, pow, pow, dead. But with a bow, like, you really have to factor in wind and, like, force and making sure that it's accurate, cause you also don't wanna make the animal suffer, like, you don't wanna hit it, and then it's, like, still alive and trottling through the woods, and now you gotta track it and hope
Hmm.
that it dies eventually so that you
Hmm.
can, really put it out of its misery, which is like it takes so much effort. And I feel like people, because they don't understand it, and it's easy to kind of write people off in like a box and say like you all fit this stereotype. People forget like that relationship that man has with hunting, and it's not like something that was super easy. And that's the reason why we moved to mass production, was because people did not have time to be out
Mm,
in the woods hunting their food every day you know
yeah,
but I'm curious,
yeah.
like, how does hunting season work? Like, how do you like? I'm assuming it's different for different animals, but I guess like for the animals, what are the main like wild game that you pursue? Because I'm familiar with venison, which is AKA deer meat, which I didn't know that until I moved to America. But I'm curious, like, what other forms of wild game do you hunt? I did see elk, and those are some big ass animals. Like, damn, you could ride an elk through the streets. But yeah,
So I'm actually really glad that you asked that because that actually touches on what we were talking about with the stereotype stuff and maybe just lack of understanding too. Like, I think that maybe some people are even surprised to learn that there are regulations and that this is very restricted and regulated and that it has
you
to be
can't just
done
walk out in the woods and shoot an animal and take it. Like, they will come
right.
for you.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's not just the rednecks are blasting their guns through the woods any day they want and any at anything they want. Like it is very regulated and you're right, it does depend on what type of game you're pursuing. So this past year I bought tags for deer, elk, bear, cougar and turkey or small game with turkey tags and that's for Washington State and then I bought a black bear tag for Alaska. um, I
I feel like
didn't
most people
actually
would hear a bear and they'll be like, "You're killing the teddy bears," but we'll get into that because I'm curious about the bear meat too.
yeah so I didn't at this past season I actually didn't fill any of my tags. I spent a few days hunting. So this was my first season elk hunting and so again, there's a really steep learning curve on this. You have to understand the animals. I didn't going into the season. I I knew everything that I could cram to try and know about elk and elk hunting, but until you get out there and do it, it's difficult, especially with a bow.
They're athletes, like, they are some athletic animals, I must say. I was really surprised. I was like, "Wow, this is a horse. Like, what is going on?"
Yeah, and that forest horse takes about 3 steps and is gone. Like they move quickly. So like
Yeah, they're very aware. Like, I remember I saw one in Oregon, and I was just walking through the woods, and they were, like, staring us down, like, "We see you." And I was like, "I'm just here. Gentle, gentle."
I actually thought it was going to be. I thought that elk hunting would be easier, and so that this season, my my priority was going to be elk hunting, and the seasons overlap. So like for archery hunting in Washington State, for deer you get an early season and a late season. Actually, it's the same for both deer and elk. There's an early season and a late season. And I should say real quick on the cougar tag, it's sort of the bear tag, but mainly just the cougar tag. I really just bought that for two reasons. One, they sell tags as like you get a discounted price if you buy a deer, elk, bear, cougar, and
A
then a small
package, I
game.
feel you.
Yeah. So I bought it because it was cheaper just to buy the whole bundle of tags. And then also I like having the tag just on the off chance that I'm hunting deer and I have a encounter with a cougar. If I feel threatened, then I'm able to, like, let's say that I was genuinely in danger for my life and I take this cougar. If I have a cougar tag in my pocket, I don't have to have the whole investigation about whether or not I was justified in taking the cougar. I can just put my tag on it and be done with it. And so I
That's
I
smart.
prefer
That's very
that. And
smart.
yeah, and so for this season, my priority was going to be trying to take an elk with my bow. And so you get like 12 days in September for elk, and that's it. I mean, it's 12 days, and then that's the early season. There is a late season. I didn't late season archery hunt for elk. I did do a little bit of late season archery hunting for deer, and deer is different. So deer, you get the entire month of September, and then you get depending on like what area you're hunting in, it's all broken down into a million different management areas, and all of those different areas have different regulations because they're managing for what the population is actually like in that local region of the state. So, depending on what area you live in, you basically get the month of September for early archery season for deer and the month of December for late season. Elk, there's 12 days in September, and then I think there's another 10 days in November. I don't recall exactly, but it's a very short season for elk, and it's probably the most desirable as far as like game that people chase, just because, like you said, they're so large. If you take an elk, you're going
You're
your
eating
freezer is going to be
good.
pretty full for a while. Yeah, exactly.
Some lean, healthy protein right there.
It's also regarded as one of the better tasting
I know Joe Rogan like
meat.
his elk just grilled with some salt or something like that.
Yeah. So, so sorry. Priority was elk, and then deer, and then I had the bear trip that I took to Alaska.
Yeah, tell me about the bears, because I feel like hunting an elk and a deer seems like, if I was a beginner hunter, that seems like, where I would focus. That's what at least Will wants to hunt. Will comes also from a hunting family, which was news to me because again, my family don't hunt. So when I saw like deer antlers for the first time, I was like, "Oh my god, they shot that." Like, "Oh my gosh, like this is so different." Um but yeah, like bears, like I didn't even know that you could hunt a bear other than to like hunt it for like the fur, which I feel is like, I mean, as a foreigner, you
Oh,
just see on like TV, like the bearskin
yeah.
rugs and like rich people just laying on I didn't know like you ate a bear. So how does bear eating work?
Okay. So another really good question, actually. There's a misconception here as well, for sure. So it really depends. It really kind of depends on the particular bear's diet, right? So,
Mm.
in Washington State, we have black bears. There are a couple of grizzly bears on the Canadian border that kind of work back and forth
Which
across the
ones are the
border. So,
mean ones? The grizzly? Or is it the brown?
well, that's actually kind of tricky too because brown bears or grizzly bears, and the distinction there is really just whether it's coastal or not. So
Mm.
people will refer to a brown bear that lives on the coast as a coastal brown bear, and like inland, like say Montana, Wyoming, Utah, they would be referred to as grizzly bears. And um, so as far as like mean, grizzly bears are way larger, much larger. There isn't there isn't a predator that takes, you know, a large male grizzly bear. Like he's the top, aside from us, right?
Yeah.
So, grizzly bears or brown bears, they're much larger. They could inflict much more damage, and just because you're larger, it comes with that attitude, right? Of like I'm the king. Like there isn't, I'm it. I'm the top. And so, as far as like get the reason I mentioned that is like fight or flight, right? Like if you get into a situation where a brown bear has to make a decision between fight or flight, being that it's the top of the chain aside from us, it might be more prone to make the fight choice than say a black bear. Especially in Washington, our black bears are not very large. They are most times going to choose flight.
I'm still trying to see a bear out here. I'm like, where are they hiding? Just
Washington's so tough because it's so thick.
I know. I'm like, they're just chilling in the woods. They don't even need to come out here. Like,
Yeah. So but that said, I think that there has probably been more attacks, and I haven't fact checked this, but it just seems like there's been more incidents with black bears where people have been injured or fatally injured, because they're less predictable, right? Like
mm,
that big bad mamma jamma brown bear, like he's a slow moving, predictable animal for the most part. But and I'm just kind of painting in broad strokes, right? Like I actually just listened to a podcast where two hunters got jumped by a sow grizzly bear last hunting season in Wyoming. Yeah, I think it was Wyoming, and it was. And so just this past year, they're walking through the woods. They're hunting elk. They're glassing off to their right. There's a ridge off to their left, and so they have like a cliff on their left hand side. So they're not really expecting any animals to be coming from the left. And a sow with cubs was, you know, somewhere off to their left, and the way he described it was that it took about 1.5 seconds for him to go from the understanding that there is no bear around us to there's a grizzly bear eating my friend. I'm just mentioning that story to say that, you know, I don't know the statistics, but I think that maybe black bears are less predictable and maybe there's more encounters, and especially if you get into states like Alaska where the black bears are much larger. I mean, yeah, I saw some black bears that were very large and that were very intimidating, and was in a few
mean
hairy.
mugging you across the lake, just like, don't you dare shoot me.
No, I mean like snapping teeth and like not across,
Wow.
like 20 yards away and snapping teeth and making the decision of whether to run at us or away from us, kind of stuff.
Ooh, that's intense. I'd been like, oh, mama,
Yeah,
I
they
didn't
can
mean
be
to be out
intimidating
here.
too. So, um, so real quick on, I'll just say on the two hunters that got attacked by the sow, um, the the guy who didn't get knocked to the ground at first. He had a rifle and he shot the bear. The bear spun around and charged him, and then his friend got up and shot the bear with a pistol, and then the bear turned and didn't attack the friend, and so they both lived. The first guy who did get attacked, he lost his thumb on one hand, and he got they both got beat up a little bit, but
Wild. That's a story though. You know, it's a cool story to at least if you lose a thumb, you can at least say a bear took it, you know?
right, right, yeah, yeah,
Like at least in the silver lining. Cool story.
yeah.
I guess like I remember you were telling me that based on what the bear eats,
Oh,
they taste different.
yes. Yeah, I got kind of sidetracked on
No,
like
no, it's all
what's
good.
more
I love
dangerous
all
or
this
whatever,
because
but
I'm like, ah, tell me
yes.
more.
So in Washington, all of our we mostly have black bears, and there are maybe a few grizzly bears that move back and forth across the border from Canada. Our black bears primarily feed on berries. A bear that is feeding on berries tastes different than a coastal brown bear eating salmon in Alaska. I haven't personally eaten a brown bear that's eating salmon in Alaska, but I've been told like don't do it, like don't take that bear because you won't eat it. And I very much was raised that if you do kill it, if you kill it you eat it. Like that was what my dad said to us, you know. And so I haven't flirted with that idea of like taking a brown bear that eats a bunch of salmon, because everyone tells me, you know, with all the fish oil, like it doesn't, you won't be able to eat it. I've seen like I've seen episodes of TV shows like Meat Eater. He did an episode where he was hunting black bear in the I forget the name of the mountain range in Alaska. It's near Anchorage. But anyways, he took a black bear that was eating blueberries, you know, and the episode I think is titled "The Sweetest Meat," you know, and so I think that if you take a black bear that's eating berries, I think that it has a much different taste to the meat than if you take a bear that's eating salmon.
How do you know, like, what the diet is, though? Like, how would you know when you're hunting it that this is a berry-eating bear versus a fish-eating bear?
Well, you don't exactly, and actually, I should touch on that. What I said about, you know, local, sustainably sourced, organic, you know, non-GMO. If you're hunting whitetail that are feeding in the wheat field in, you know, Spokane or whatever, if that wheat field is not organic and not, you know, is GMO, then that whitetail is not organic, right? Like, so location, time of year, those are big ones. And then also it kind of gets back to, you sort of have to understand the animal and understand their habits a little bit just to be in a position to harvest one. Where you're going to find them is where they feed, right? So
Okay,
like,
okay.
so especially with bears, like you're probably you're probably going to find that bear coming to berries or coming to fish. You know what I mean? Or
I
coming
see, I see.
to eat asparagus on the shoreline, or crabs and shellfish. They do that quite a bit too. Uh,
I guess,
so
like, the actual harvesting process, do you do it, like, on site after the animal is down, or do you, like, hoist the animal, drag it out the woods, which I assume is its own headache, and then break it down somewhere else? Maybe not in the woods, you know?
there's a couple different ways to do that, especially when you talk about elk, because you know there
Like,
are
that's a
elk.
big animal to be dragging through the woods, like
Right, right. There are elk that get to 1,000 pounds. There's a couple different ways to do it. In every way, you're not you're not carrying any organs that you're not planning to eat, right? So you might take heart and liver, or maybe some people even spleen, but you might take a few organs, but basically that's a lot of weight. So field dressing would be the first thing that you do, and that's just going to be removing organs and stomach, and that's going to be a lot of weight right there. So if you took a smaller deer, you might just field dress it and just remove organs, with exception to whatever you're going to bring home. Like if you want the heart, then you might bring that, but you're going to remove a lot of the weight, and then you pack the deer out from there. Depending on the size of the animal, there's another method called the Gutless Method, where people will skin and remove the four quarters rather than removing the organs. So, like if you've ever cleaned a fish, that would be like field dressing. So, if instead you filleted the fish and you left all of the organs that you would typically remove if you were cleaning a fish, that would be like the Gutless Method. So it's sort of like whether you take the fillets or whether you remove the organs and bring the rest of the fish.
I see. Do you have a preference?
I'm still fairly inexperienced, but right now, my preference is just what. So my sole motivator is the meat for the freezer. So I don't care so much about, like you said, that hide or that rug. So I would, whatever is going to be the easiest way to get that meat to the freezer. That's what I would prefer.
Sweet, sweet. I guess like so hunting season hasn't started at least for this year, but it will be soon. I feel like when this comes out. So I guess like what are you most excited for this hunting season?
Oh my gosh, that's so hard to answer because right now, because it's the off season, because they're, right now it's just, if you're an ethical bow hunter, you're just shooting your bow and making sure that you're dialed. There, believe me, there's guys that just pull it out and blow the dust off it, and away we go. But there are guys that are shooting their bows right now to make sure they're ready for this fall. So because it's the off season right now, all I can think about is spring turkey, which is so funny because you hear so you hear so many people like, oh, it's such a dumb bird. But
Yeah,
I
because
would
Americans have been eating them on the regular every year, and they still haven't learned anything.
I would challenge anyone that believes that to grab a bow and go try and get themselves a turkey. I guess that's all I'll say about that. But so
Lol.
right now, all I can think about is spring turkey because that's gonna start here April 15th, through May 31st. And so we don't really have turkeys on the west side of the mountains. We do, so I shouldn't say that. We do, but they're further south. So like I live on the northwestern quadrant of our state, and so I would have to travel a lot further south than I would have to travel east, to find turkeys. So yeah, come April, May, I'll be headed over the mountains looking for turkeys. And
So interesting. I can just imagine wild turkeys just out there, just gobbling.
now I'm most excited. Actually, my wife and I had a really cool experience this last, was it spring? Yeah, last spring, where I had bought this little like pop up blind thing, and it's like a little tent that you throw on the ground and pop up, and it has a little window you can drop down so you can sneak an arrow out the window or whatever. But so we have these little chairs, little triangle tripod chairs,
I
and
feel you. I feel you.
we're
The beach pull up foldy chairs. I feel
yeah,
you.
so we're sitting in our chairs in the blind, and we leave at dark 30 and hike this stuff in to the top of this bowl, and we're sitting on the top of this bowl and watching the sun come up, and the sun's just coming
Your
over.
wife is a G for doing this, cause I know we'll be struggling to get me out of bed just to go skiing. So like she's a G for doing this.
So okay, so I'm gonna have to expand on the story a little bit because you said that. But so we watch the sun come up over the ridge line, over the horizon line, right, and we can see forever. This was like it's just over the eastern slope of the mountains, but where it's still more wooded and timbered, but like pine forest. Anyways, sun comes up over the ridge. It's just beautiful, just spectacular. And then the turkey lights off, thunder in the distance. And we're excited, right? Like, because we're seeing the sun come up, we hear turkeys below us, and that's a feat in and of itself. Like, just getting yourself to where you hear a turkey in the woods, like we felt
You're like,
accomplished.
yes, there is something here.
They do exist. Yeah, that's what we said. But no, so what you said about her, being a G is like she was pregnant, like I want to say she was like 3 months pregnant and like really dealing with the morning sickness. And so
She a even bigger G when you say that. I'm like, she really I wanna give her a fist bump. I'm like, she a different breed. That is one special lady.
she is for sure. And so that morning we went out at dark 30, like I said, saw the sun come up. We heard a couple turkeys in this bowl, and we had to check out of the Airbnb that day. It was our last day, so we sat there for a couple hours, did some calling for the turkeys. We actually heard turkeys come by us. We didn't see them, but I heard clucking and purring that hens do. And so we knew we were very much like in the game, but we had to go check out of the Airbnb. And so we did that. We left for 2 hours, went and checked out of the Airbnb, and went back with the thought that because in the spring you can only harvest toms, and uh,
What's a
or
tom?
sorry, not toms. You can only harvest male birds. I shouldn't have said that.
Okay, okay.
A tom would be like a more mature male bird. A jake would be a less mature male bird. And so
Who
again,
named
back
these birds Tom and Jake?
right, yeah, yeah. But that's going back to the regulation thing. Like these are decisions that you have to make like in the moment. Like you need to be able to tell a male turkey from a female turkey, and I think someone might overlook that detail. Like if they hadn't thought about like what it's like to go turkey hunting, they wouldn't maybe think about like how do you tell the difference between a male one and a female one, because that took me a minute. But anyways, we had this thought that we'd heard these male birds gobbling down in the bowl. They might have had hens with them at that time in the morning, but maybe they've gone and checked on their hens and maybe already bred them or whatever. And now, come late morning, they're looking for, you know, another gal to chat up. And so
I'm dying.
we were gonna go set back up and see if we could
Turkeys flirting. I'm dying. Okay.
and see if we could be the other gal that he wanted to chat up. And so we went we go back out
Trying to
like
be the side chick.
yeah, yeah, barbecue sauce. So we set up like 10 a.m. and around 11 a.m. I'm doing turkey calls with a mouth call, and he answers back, and I call
Like,
again and he
babe,
answers
what's
back.
up? I'm
Yeah.
here looking for Papa.
And he's like maybe like 200 yards downhill of us, and very much sounds like he's interested, and he's headed our way. And I looked over at her, and so actually I didn't at first. I just heard the sound, and like it's really quiet. We're trying to be really quiet with exception to the turkey calls, and I hear this like sound, and I look over, and she's like salivating and like swan, like just green. And I'm like, hon, how are you doing? Like, are you okay? And like yeah,
She trying
I
to
don't.
keep it together.
Yeah, she didn't. She was not feeling good, but she hadn't said a word. Like, hadn't said like, "Hey." I'm like, "Hey, we can go. Like, it's okay. Well, let's go get some ice cream. Do the thing." And so we did. We packed up and we went and got ice cream. And when we got there, she was like, she got her, like mint cookies and cream. Cold Stone,
Her
and looked at
pregnancy cravings. I feel
yeah, and
you. I
about
feel
the
you.
only thing she could eat at that point, and she looked at me and she was like, thank you so much." so,
She was
so
like, I'm
yeah.
just holding out here for my man so he could catch a turkey. Trying to keep the vomit down. Strong family. I must say, like, you are honestly incredible. Like, ever since I met you, I know you're like absolutely the sweetest. But I'm curious, like, how is it now being a dad? Like, I remember when we met, you were non-daddy stan, and now you're a daddy. Like, ah.
Oh man, it's like everything has changed, and like the best way, right? But also in the craziest way. And basically it's like all the cliches are true. Like if I were going to try and describe it to someone, it's like name a cliche and it's that, you know what I mean? Like
Like accurate. They were not lying. We
yeah,
don't sleep.
you don't sleep, or you didn't know you could love someone, like like all the like gushy like cliche things, like it's very much
Aw.
true. Yeah, so no, it's
Aw.
been it's been great, it really has.
But you're also like a papa of like chickens. And did you get a bunny? I forgot if you did get the bunny.
No, we decided that we had enough things to try and take care of for the moment.
So
So
what are all the house pets? Let's hear it.
we have 3 dogs, 5 chickens, and a newborn baby.
Sweet. Are the chickens producing eggs on the regular?
They are. They do about an egg a day.
That's
But
so cool.
it kind of varies. Like sometimes, some days I'll go out there and there'll be 3 eggs there. But yeah, I'd say on average it's like an egg a day.
That's so cool. That's so cool. I guess like what's the hardest part of raising chickens? Because I've heard the coyotes be out there trying to snatch them up.
Yes. You gotta hide your wife, hide your kids. Um,
Hide your chickens.
hide your hens, hide your chicks. But no. What is the hardest? They're pretty easy. The hardest thing is just keeping the coop clean. Yeah, they they
They poop a
need.
lot. Is
Oh
that
my
the
gosh,
issue?
yeah, they do. Um, and that's something that is not the best as far as like we've been letting them roam, letting them reign. So like every morning I'll open the door on the coop and let them go do their chicken thing and hunt for worms. And then every night I'll lock it up so the coyotes don't get them or whatever. But they poop all over the front porch or the shed or whatever they get into. They poop all over it. So, but yeah, that I mean, it's just keeping the coop nice and clean so that they have nice chips for laying eggs in, and they can make a nice bed. Because
Sweet.
if you don't, they'll find somewhere in your yard to do it, and then it's like Easter egg hunt time. So
Oh, wow. Interesting, interesting. I guess
yeah.
I'm curious, like, because I know we didn't touch on this too much, but I like as a hunter, I guess like how do you deal with sort of like the media's or just like the world's perception of hunters? And I guess I'm curious, like, how is it like as a hunter when you do see people that make hunters have a bad name?
Mm. I feel like that was 2 loaded questions, but so okay, I almost touched on this just already in our conversation, but because you mentioned, you gave the vegans a warning, like, um, you know,
Beware, don't cry
beware.
yet, okay? Like it's all good. Just breathe.
So, especially in the industry that in the state that I live in and the industry that I work in, I feel like it's almost a bad word at work, like hunting, right?
They're like,
Uh,
"Oh my god, non-liberal." If you say hunter, they're like, "Ooh, he's
mm,
one of those."
no, there's genuine concern there. Like I really had to give some thought to whether I would tell coworkers that I like bow hunting or whether I would do this podcast, right?
No, I think
Like
you're dope. Love
um
it.
there's some concern there, but I think that, how do I say this? So my beliefs are like this. I I personally, when I'm trying to like make decisions about this, and I actually already talked about how in that pursuit your admiration for the animal grows, right? So there's a lot of reflection that happens around, especially we have like a lot of deer that live in our yard. So there's a daily connection to these animals, and so there's a constant evaluation that goes on in my mind of like, is this what I want to do, right? Like, do I want to take that animal, like let's be honest, take that animal's life so that we've talked about the meat, like that's nice, that's great, but to get there you have to take that animal's life. And so there's an evaluation that goes on there, and where I've landed is that we look to the natural world to learn, to inform everything that we do, right? Like I work in computer science. The computer is born out of observation of the natural world and harnessing and synthesizing that understanding, right? And so I look to the natural world, and what I see is like two things. I see complex systems. Just I see design personally, and I won't. We don't have to go too deep down that rabbit
No, I
hole.
love
Um,
that. Yeah, I'm like, I
but
love that.
but I see complex systems, and what I see is a blueprint for a couple different ways that this is done in the natural world. Like whether you want to be a meat eater or not, like whether you want to be an herbivore, carnivore, omnivore, that's totally your choice. But it is done in the natural world. There are meat eaters, there are carnivores. There is a blueprint in the natural world for eating other animals on the chain. And so when I see there's these three blueprints, there's the bear, there's the omnivore, there's the deer, there's the herbivore, and there's the wolf maybe as a carnivore.
I feel you. I feel
There's
you.
not as
Yeah.
yeah, but I look at those three blueprints and I say, well, where do I fit in? And I don't feel that I line up with the rabbit or the other prey animals, and I don't. I feel like I'm probably most closely related to the bear. And if I were gonna have an issue hunting an animal, it might be the bear. That's probably the one that I waffle a little bit on, because of that. But I fall back to that, and I fall back to there's a blueprint in the natural world. This is a natural process, and I'm okay with it. And I've made that decision. I'm okay with that, and so I'm willing to take that animal and provide that nutrient dense protein for my family. But and I'm fine with people that choose the vegan blueprint and they say, this is right for me. I'm totally fine with whatever other people's beliefs are. I'm not going to try and push mine on someone else. Um, I'm fine with that. Where what I take issue with is people that are omnivores that do eat meat but don't condone hunting. And I have an issue with that because I feel like you're just disconnected. I feel like, and it happens like, right, we've through progression, like we have this convenience. You can go to the store, you can buy the meat, you can go to the McDonald's, you can buy the chicken nuggets, but don't forget that somebody killed 20 chickens and made a slurry for your nuggets. Do you know what I mean? Like, and um, I'm
Exactly.
I said it that way on purpose, but I think people get disconnected from it. I think that there are people that eat meat and don't condone hunting and are losing sight of the fact just through disconnection because they're just no longer connected to having to hunt and forage and take the life so that they can eat. I think that as a meat eater, the most ethical thing that you can do would be to go harvest an animal and do it for yourself one time and just say like, I think that would be the most ethical thing that you could do as a meat eater. So
I
if you,
agree.
if you and there's an argument, I understand, like I recognize that there's an argument to be made. Like I made the natural world blueprint argument. I recognize that there's an argument to be made for us being at the top of the chain and progression and maybe evolution, and maybe we're supposed to rise above or something. I don't see it. I don't see the way forward. What I see is a natural process and I guess I've made that decision for me and mine.
I must say, I definitely like applaud you for being authentically you, and it like pains me that you feel like any sort of like angst about just sharing who you are,
Mm,
especially at work. Because to me, it's like everyone's individuality is what makes us great, and like the fact that people feel in any way that they have to hide any part of themselves because people are so quick to judge, like it really breaks my heart. Which is why I felt like it was so important to have you on the podcast because I want people to know like yeah, of course, there are some asshole hunters out there, and we should call those people out. But there
mhm,
are people that do this not to be an asshole. Like they do this because this is just their way of life. And
mhm,
like I think like if we were trying to figure out how to make the world a meatless eating world, we should really look to India because they have been hitting it out the park, forever. But I do think like there's a balance to it. And I personally, as a meat eater, I hate having to touch raw meat. I know my problems, and I definitely think like I'm a huge hypocrite because I like buy my food from the grocery store and I don't actually go out and hunt my animals myself, and I take that privilege, you know what I mean, with me. And I feel like most people will not even own up to the fact that that is a form of privilege, and that actually at the end of the day, like, that on some level is crippling us because like now say if you can't depend on that system anymore, what do you do? How do you
Mhm.
feed yourself? You don't have an answer. And to me, like, that is not freedom. You know, that's not what actual freedom looks like. I guess, like, is there any like, are you on the gram? Can people find you on the internet?
They can, yes. I think I have like 3 followers or something, but
That's
yeah,
all
no,
good. You'll have
yeah,
4 today because I will
okay.
add you.
Yeah, so it's pnw dot never
You can look
never
it up if you need to. It's all good.
trying to remember. I think it's pnw dot never dot summer, but I couldn't remember if never summer was one word or not.
It's okay. I'll add it in the description so the people can find you if they want to. That's so cool. Well, thank you, Stan, for coming on the pod. Like, it's such a pleasure. Like, I love talking to you at work. So I was like, I need to get you on here. I need people to know so they can stop giving hate hunters so much flack. Because you guys are actually dope.
No, the feeling is definitely mutual, and I love working with you too. And you know, it's just it's easy, it's fun to have a conversation. So thank you for having me.